राधा कृष्ण पादान सहगन ललिता श्री विशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। श्रीला प्रभुपाद की जय। I'll share my screen. Are you all able to see my screen?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. Okay, so we are discussing from the introduction to Bhagavad Gita. And last time, I believe we discussed a little bit about, how at the time of leaving the body, it's a very crucial moment. And whatever thoughts one has at that time, the soul transmigrates accordingly, right? Whatever one is thinking. And therefore, it is important for us to practice gradually, transform our consciousness from dwelling upon the material energy of the Lord to the transcendental energy of the Lord, or the superior energy of the Lord, right? And gradually, through practice, through sadhana, the process of devotional service that has been provided to us by our acharyas, if we follow that process would eventually lead us to the constant remembrance of Krishna. And after leaving that body, we can obtain the lotus feet of Krishna. And after that, Krishna is basically indicating to Arjun, he's not suggesting Arjun to give up fighting, but what he's suggesting is he must fight, but at the same time, he should be always thinking or remembering of Krishna, even at the time of fighting, right? So as indicated in this verse, therefore, Arjun, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna. At the same time, continue your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt, right? So as Prabhupada is indicating, Krishna is not suggesting Arjun to simply, give up fighting and just remember him, abdicate his duties as a Kshatriya, right? But what he's suggesting is he must perform his duties, but at the same time, he should do so while remembering Krishna. So Prabhupada then gives the example of, one of the examples that our acharyas give us, right? Because many times this question comes, that how is it possible that we can remember Krishna 24/7, especially for grihasthas and even otherwise, right? It is very, 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 very difficult, right? Because mind is constantly thinking about something. We are engaged in our day-to-day activities. We have to perform our day-to-day activities, have to go on to our business. So we have to sleep, right? The basic necessities of life. So how is it possible? And Prabhupada says that the acharyas give this example of a married man who is attached to another man, right? So in that case, although the woman is attending to the daily chores, she's serving her husband nicely, she's taking care of the household, but her consciousness is always attached or dwelling on that other man who is the lover, right? So in a similar fashion, uh, one should kind of develop an attachment. Basically, that's the point, right? If we develop an attachment towards Krishna somehow or the other, and basically the process, Prabhupada will give the process in the following paragraph, which we will be reading today. He will explain the process as has been given to us by our acharyas, that how can we develop that attachment towards Krishna, right? The whole point is to develop that attachment, because once we get attached to a person, no matter where we are, no matter what we are doing, we will always be thinking of him or her, right? Like we see, another example is of a parent, right? A mother, once a mother leaves the child at home, she has to go out to work or attend to a business. The child is alone at home, a baby who cannot really take care of himself. And, although the mother has left the baby in the care of some other person, maybe a nanny or a relative, but, her mind or consciousness will always be engaged in thinking about the child, right? Oh, what would my child be doing right now? I hope he or she has taken the food. He or she may not be crying, right? That way, the mother is constantly, her thought will always be dwelling upon the well-being of the child, even though she may be doing the work that she is doing, right? So in that way, once we are attached to a person, our consciousness naturally dwells upon him, right? So the idea is, we need to dovetail our day-to-day activities, design our day in such a way that we are constantly thinking about how can we strengthen our attachment unto Krishna, unto the Supreme Person. And the way the process has been designed by our acharyas and given to us by Srila Prabhupada, the process essentially has been designed in a way that gradually, by the practice of it, effortlessly, if we are diligent, of course it needs effort because we need to be diligent, we need to persevere, right? But if we do that, right, utsaha nischayat dharyat, as Srila Rupa Goswami tells us in the Nectar of Instruction, right? These three things, utsaha, nischay, and dharya. If we have these three things, then eventually, and we stick with these three things with the process of bhakti, the devotional service, then the process itself works, and that will naturally lead us towards developing an attachment towards Krishna. And once that happens, right, we can experience this feeling that no matter what we are doing in our material lives, we will constantly be thinking about Krishna, right? And that is an indication that we have set ourselves for perfection, right? So we will move on from there onto the next paragraph. We start with Yoginam api sarvesham. Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namini Namaste Saraswati Deva Gaurvani Pracharine Nirvishe Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatarine Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, so I'll read starting from Yoginam api sarvesham. But the Lord says, Yoginam api sarvesham mad katenantaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yo mam same yuktatamu matah. So in the previous verse, as we actually let me start from Arjuna said, right, because it's in continuation to that particular verse. So in the previous verse, Prabhupada is basically reciting this verse where Arjuna is saying, O Madhusudan, the system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable to me, for the mind is restless and unsteady, right? So basically Krishna goes over the process of yoga, right, which has some very tough rules and regulations, and that just seemed impractical to Arjun, right? As he's saying, that just seems unendurable, not practical, because the mind is very restless and unsteady, right? It is difficult for me to do that. And as a response to that, later in that same chapter, Krishna is saying this verse, Yoginam api sarvesham madgatenantaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam same yuktatamu matah. Of all yogis, the one with great faith who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me, is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. So one who thinks of the Supreme Lord always is the greatest yogi, the supermost jnani, and the greatest devotee at the same time. The Lord further tells Arjun that as a Kshatriya, he cannot give up his fighting, but if Arjun fights remembering Krishna, then he will be able to remember Krishna at the time of death. but one must be completely surrendered in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Right. So here, Krishna very clearly saying that out of all of the yogis, the one who is always thinking of me within himself and renders transcendental loving service to me is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all, right? That is my opinion. So this is actually a very, very important verse, right? Because this term yoga, especially these days, right, it is just so popular. It has become one of the biggest kind of an advertisement gimmick. It's like a fashion statement, more like a fashion statement now, right? Wherever this term yoga is used, right? And we have seen many people who have kind of made it their profession. They teach a so-called yoga, right? Basically, yoga for them is some kind of a physical exercise, some kind of stretching, a combination of stretching, meditation, right? In certain way with some new creativity thrown in, right? There are these days there are different varieties of yoga, right? There is one I've heard that called a hot yoga or something, wherein the temperature is raised of the room to a certain degree. It's like relatively hot, where they're practicing this so-called yoga, the physical exercise that they do. And they call it yoga, but it's nothing but some kind of exercise that sort of gives them some kind of a mental relaxation, and it's good for their physical well-being, right? So yoga has been pretty much reduced to a form of physical exercise, right? Without understanding the meaning of yoga. So the term yoga itself, the Sanskrit meaning is union, basically, right? As Krishna here is indicating that he is the most intimately united. The keyword here is united, or in the Sanskrit term here, yukta, right? So yoga means union, right? When we understand that we are the servants of Krishna and we cannot enjoy independent of Krishna, right? When we come to a true consciousness, right? So we are united with Krishna through the transcendental loving service. Union does not mean immersion, right? Many people confuse this term yoga to understand that, we lose our identity and we merge into the existence of Krishna, but that is incorrect understanding. We are the energies of Krishna, and in fact, the difference between the superior and the inferior energy of Krishna, right? Because we are also the energies of Krishna. And this material world, what we see around us is also the energy of Krishna, right? Both of us are the energies of Krishna. But the difference between the two is that the superior energy of Krishna, there is a free will, right? It has its own identity. Although the source of both the energies is Krishna himself, but the superior energy of Krishna has some level of minute independence, right? Which Krishna, although he can, but he never kind of takes over that, right? So that free will, what is called the free will part of it, right? That free will always stays, right? So there is no question of merging and losing that free will by merging oneself into the identity of Krishna, right? That is actually incorrect understanding. The true understanding of the term yoga is to unite with Krishna through transcendental loving service, right? By rendering service unto Krishna, there is a mutual give and take of this love, right? Anand, right? Happiness. When we serve Krishna, we find happiness through that service, and Krishna also finds satisfaction and happiness through that service. Although Krishna himself is self-sufficient, he is Anandamaya, right? He himself is Atma Ram, right? One of the terms used for Krishna is Atma Ram. He is inherently blissful. He is not dependent upon anything or anyone for his own bliss. But at the same time, when he engages in the transcendental loving relationship with his devotees, he experiences that bliss, right? And therefore, he has a unique relationship with each individual living entity. And therefore, because he has that unique individual relationship with each living entity, there is no question of that individual living, giving up his identity, right? There's just no question of that. There is no way that identity can be lost, right? So that identity, that unique identity of a living entity always stays, right? That is not lost. So that is a misinterpretation. The true interpretation of the term yoga is uniting with Krishna through transcendental loving service, right? And Krishna here very clearly indicates that one who engages or renders transcendental loving service to me is the most intimately united, right? The term intimate here is also very important, right? He's saying most intimately united. So there cannot be any, there cannot be a more intimate way of uniting with Krishna other than transcendental loving service. The term yukta tamo, right? Yukta tamo means most intimately united. So if, let's say, someone argues that yoga means losing one's identity by merging into the existence of Krishna, then that would become the most intimate way of uniting with Krishna, isn't it? I mean, you're so intimate if you have two distinct objects, right? And one object merges into the other object in such a way that this object loses its identity and becomes the same as this object, right? Then in that case, that would be the most intimate way of union, right? If object A merges into object B in such a way that object B completely loses its identity and appears to be the same as object A, that would be the most intimate way of union. But Krishna is not saying that. Krishna is saying, the one who renders transcendental loving service to me is the most intimately united. So he here himself is very clearly defining by saying that the most intimate way to unite with Krishna is by serving, by rendering loving service unto him, right? So although he's not saying by merging into me, right? So this here itself, Krishna is kind of refuting this argument. People who kind of tend to give this argument that yoga means merging into the existence of the Supreme, Krishna himself is refuting that by saying that the most intimate way of uniting with Krishna is by rendering transcendental loving service, right? So by rendering transcendental loving service clearly indicates, right? If something or someone is rendering a service to me, he clearly has a different identity than myself, right? He's a different entity than what I am, right? Only then I can acknowledge that this thing or this person is rendering some kind of a service unto me, right? So Krishna here clearly indicates the difference in identity of him and the devotee, and that through transcendental loving service, one can be most intimately united with him. And that is the true purport of the term yoga. So Krishna is making it very, very clear, and there should not be any confusion about it. And in fact, this verse can be quoted when, some people tend to argue, especially impersonalists, right? If they tend to argue, sometimes they say Suham, they tend to quote so many things from the Vedas. And Bhagavad Gita, it's an Upanishad, right? And directly spoken by the Lord. And among the greatest impersonalists, even Shankaracharya wrote a commentary about Bhagavad Gita, right? So this is coming directly from the Bhagavad Gita, right? So no one can refute this particular verse. And the purport of the term yoga in its truest sense is the loving devotional service unto the Lord through bhakti is the most and is the topmost yoga, basically, right? So one who thinks that the Supreme Lord always is the greatest yogi, the supermost jnani, and the greatest devotee at the same time. So whenever we think of Krishna in this way, we are essentially, we have already kind of passed the stages of being a yogi and a jnani, right? We become the devotee. The Lord further tells Arjun that as a Kshatriya, he cannot give up his fighting, but if Arjuna fights remembering Krishna, then he will be able to remember Krishna at the time of death. But one must be completely surrendered in the transcendental loving service to the Lord, right? So that's the next point, right? So before we move on to the next point, I just want to know if there are any questions or comments about what we just discussed about this term yoga, what it really means, what is its true purport, and who is the topmost yogi.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, wonderful explanation. I just had a comment about, you were talking about how there are different forms of yoga and new things have come up in the name of yoga.
Yes,
So
Prabhuji.
few days back, I found out that there is a version of yoga which is called as Doga. Have you heard that?
Really?
So what Doga means is, so many people have pet dogs,
Mhm.
and they say that when we do yoga, they get bored. So why don't we also involve them with us in yoga? So they teach their dogs to do yoga. So both the dog and the master do together, and that's called as Doga. You can search it up on Google. You will find it. There are
Oh my
YouTube videos also about Doga and how to train your dog, etc.
So the dog sits still for that long, Ganpati Govind.
No, the dog does the yoga along with the master. Same poses
That's
that the
what-
master is doing.
Oh, the poses. Okay.
And the people post their videos on YouTube and other social media. So in Kali Yuga, everything is diluted.
There is goat yoga. I heard about that.
Yeah.
Goat yoga. What is that, Mataji?
That is something. Literally, I heard about that too. Something like standing on the goat or something like doing yoga with a goat. There is such strange things.
Oh my goodness.
Mataji, I have heard beer yoga too,
Beer yoga.
and with picture also. I mean, they show posted pictures with participants coming in the big hall with beer, and then they do beer yoga.
I've heard of Bikram yoga where you sit in a heated room or something like a
Yeah.
hot sauna bath. You take a sauna bath along with the yoga or something like that. There's something heat related.
Yeah,
So
that
it's
is popular.
now.
Sorry, Jiva.
Oh, so it's become like a joke now. It's so many kinds. I've heard of laughing yoga where people they laugh. They laugh
Okay.
just so it puts them in a good mood.
Right.
And they call it yoga. So anything they're doing.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Somebody was giving a laughing yoga class in Ava, and I almost thought I'll join. Then I said, am I crazy to go something like, this was before the pandemic, before.
Bikram yoga is very popular. Simsbury has one. So many of people I know go there.
Yeah,
Bikram yoga.
Yeah, but the owner got arrested.
Yeah, I got
For
arrested
molesting
for
women.
for
That's such a
sexual
joke.
sexual assault and all that. Yeah.
Yoga is meant for curbing all your sinful desires and all this
Mhm.
nonsense. And the owner of Bikram Yoga himself got arrested
Yeah.
for it. He couldn't
He'll be
control.
doing prison yoga.
Yeah.
But
So,
Doga tops it all. I think.
yeah. This is the first time I'm hearing about it. It's amazing.
So once we went for book distribution in Glastonbury, there was this Apple Harvest Festival in Glastonbury. So we were roaming around in the park trying to distribute Bhagavad Gitas. So we ran into a couple, and I started explaining about Bhagavad Gita. And during, while talking, found out that they are from Pakistan, Muslims, both the couples. They were students, but they were couple. So they said, okay, that's fine. All your Gita and everything that is mentioned is good, but your Gita talks about yoga. And what I see in America is that, so with yoga, you go to God. By doing yoga, you go to God. And you can go to any yoga studio, pay $100, and that's how you go to God. Just pay $100 fees, and you reach God. So that's their idea. That just by paying $100, you can reach God. He was saying in a sarcastic way, obviously, that how could you go to God just by paying $100 to a person and do yoga and go to God? But yeah, then I explained to him that how yoga that is being done today is completely diluted and perverted form of the yoga that is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. And then he kind of understood.
It sounds like you are doing yoga as you speak now.
No, I was just little bit walking in my home because there's no exercise. That's all. Walking yoga.
That's good. That's good for you.
Yeah. So, that's a very good point, Prabhuji, and thank you for sharing that. Right. So basically, this tells us how badly religion and Vedic literature in particular has been misappropriated by the cheaters in this day and age, right? And this has created a havoc, right? Because young kids, right, people, they have not really read from authentic sources. They just hear these terms, right? And they just get so confused. They decide to give it up. They just think, it's just all cheating activities going on here and there, right? So let me just simply engage in my day-to-day material activities, right? So this has become a big discouragement point for people in general, right? And that kind of, I think that just makes us think, right? It just puts more responsibility on our shoulders for people who are in this movement within ISKCON, right? It just should make us realize that it is very important for us to go out and give the true purport of the Vedic literature to the world. Just like, Prabhupada made that effort, right? He came from India to the US at such a ripe age, so that people in general can benefit from it, because that's all is going on in this day and age. When you see these terms, in the news, all kind of craziness in the name of religion is going on. And I've been speaking with so many people since the time I was introduced to Bhagavad Gita. So many of my friends, very well-educated people, right, of a very rational mind. And when you speak to them, they are just so confused because of all of these terms that are floating around, these so-called cheating gurus, right? And they are so popular, they have a huge fan following, right? And the next day you find they have been arrested in a rape case, right? So people in general just have started to detest religious people because of this cheating propensity. And therefore, it becomes even more important for us to go out and tell them what Prabhupada told us, right? He gave us the purest form of yoga, basically, right? It's not that people are not interested, right? That's why they're able to cash on this term yoga, because the term yoga was already very popular, right? There is some kind of fascination in people in general, whether it be the West or the East. People are fascinated by this term yoga, and that's why they were able to cash on it. So we should kind of utilize that and should not allow them to cash in, but provide people with the real purport of the term yoga. Now, of course, the real purport of the term yoga and the way to achieve it is not so easy, right? We need to follow 4 regulative principles. We have to be focused, right? So therefore we find it a little difficult, but Prabhupada proved that if we are genuine, right, and if we have a true desire to give this to the masses, and if we ourselves are pure on the strength of our sadhana, then Krishna himself helps, and people at least who have some sukriti, right, they will be able to take it up really quickly, right? So Prabhupada himself kind of established that for us, right? So we are not really left with any excuses now. And therefore, we should feel that responsibility. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now moving on, this term, right? The Lord further tells Arjun that as a Kshatriya, he cannot give up his fighting. But if Arjun fights remembering Krishna, then he will be able to remember Krishna at the time of death. But one must be completely surrendered in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. And then Prabhupada says, we work not with our body, actually, but with our mind and intelligence. So if the intelligence and the mind are always engaged in the thought of the Supreme Lord, then naturally the senses are also engaged in his service. Superficially, at least, the activities of senses remain the same, but the consciousness is changed, right? So this is again a very important term. Many people think that when we come to Krishna consciousness, right, we kind of move to a totally different world, right? Many people, there is a hesitation even at the time of taking initiation. Some people think that, my life will become without any rasa. I won't be able to go out for movies, won't be able to do all kind of stuff, right? There are some rules and regulations that I will have to follow, right? People just think that we will not be able to kind of live our day-to-day normal lives, right? But here, Krishna is clearly indicating that, right? We do not really have to give up our day-to-day routine, the work that we are engaged with, our day-to-day activities, right? We do not really have to give that up. All that we have to do is we have to change the consciousness with which we perform our duties, right? So in the case of Arjun, since he was a Kshatriya, he was a fighter, and Krishna himself is telling him, in fact, when Arjun proposes to Krishna that it's better for me to give up fighting and probably I should go out in some forest and just sit down there and meditate, right? Why are you telling me to engage in this ghastly war wherein I will have to kill my own kins, right? Why do you suggest I should be doing that? And Krishna says, what you are saying, it seems to be wise from an external point of view, but in true sense, that is nothing but cowardice if you do that, right? Because no one, even for a moment, can avoid karma, right? One has to act. It does not mean that if you sit under a tree just meditating, it does not mean that you can give up your karma. Even while sitting, if you're thinking something in your head, if you're thinking about the war, that itself becomes an act, and you won't be able to sit under that tree for too long because you have a Kshatriya propensity, right? And that propensity will push you to pick up your bow and arrow and fight, right? So instead of becoming party to the infamy by giving up on this war, because people will call you a coward, that you ran away from this war, and you will not be able to give up your fighting propensity, right? So that would be the most foolish thing for you to do. So that is not the right way to do this yoga. The right way to do this yoga is you engage in the propensity according to the religious principles, but always thinking about Krishna. If you are able to do that, if you are able to engage in your prescribed duties according to the religious principles, at the same time, if we can think about Krishna while performing those duties, then that action itself becomes devotion, basically, right? And by doing that, that becomes the truest way and the best way for us to be Krishna conscious 24/7, right? Now, of course, just like anything else, it's easier said than done, right? But through practice, right? If we invest some time in kind of scheduling our lives, right? Designing our lives in a way, and that's why the regulative principles have been established, right? So if someone is engaged in an activity that is, more like gambling, right? Then it becomes very difficult to think about Krishna, right? Because you're always thinking about winning the next move, right? Because gambling, just by its very nature, it is like that. Similarly, illicit sex is like that, right? These things, these are known as the pillars of irreligiosity, right? The pillars of sin. They are called that way because they just make it extremely difficult for us to be Krishna conscious. They will not allow us to be able to think of Krishna. And that is why Prabhupada and our acharyas have kind of enforced these things on us, right? For our own benefit, so that our mind can be prepared of thinking about Krishna 24/7, right? So that we can stay 24/7 Krishna conscious, right? So if we can follow the guidance that has been given to us, if we can follow the process of sadhana bhakti that has been given to us, as has been explained in Srimad Bhagavatam, and Prabhupada is quoting from that here, right? Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atma Nivedanam, right? The 9 processes of bhakti, if we can engage in it and follow the process of sadhana bhakti, and if we design our lives in such a way that it becomes easy for us to do this, along with doing our day-to-day activities, then that becomes the ideal situation or the ideal condition that would enable us to be Krishna conscious 24/7, right? So we just have to make that effort, and there is a lot of help available to us. Of course, the spiritual master is the biggest help. He is there, and he is there for, just like Arjun was guided by Krishna himself. So Krishna was acting like a guru for him, and Arjun accepted Krishna as the guru. Similarly, in our case, we are fortunate that we are a part of a disciplic succession, right? We are a part of the process. We are part of this lineage, really, right? And we, all of us, once we take initiation, we have a guru who initiates us into this process, formally accepts us into the sampradaya. And at the same time, we also have several Shiksha Gurus, right? People who have already made progress in their devotional life to a certain extent. So there is a lot of help available. There is a lot of guidance available. And there is also a lot of guidance available in the form of the writings of our acharyas, right? And first and foremost, the writings of Srila Prabhupada. He is the founder acharya, as well as the foremost Shiksha Guru for all of us who are part of this family. So through his guidance, which are very, very practical, right? Because Prabhupada, was here with us, and he came to the West, and he, in a very, very difficult situation, he proved that Krishna consciousness works, right? If it can work on hippies who are totally engrossed in the material way of life, right? If it can work on them, then it can certainly work on people who are more civilized, so-called closer to a normal civilization, right? It can definitely work on them. So Prabhupada, through his own example, proved that, right? So there should not be any doubt that the process does not work. The process definitely works. And the guidance that has been provided to us through, the spiritual master, the Shiksha Guru, the writings of our acharyas, and, the fellow devotees, we should make 100% use of all of this facility, such nice facility that has been created for us in the form of ISKCON by Srila Prabhupada, right? And we should try our best to leverage it, because, who knows if we miss this opportunity now, it is very, very difficult. Although whatever progress we made, Krishna promises that, that would stay with us, but still, why to take that risk, right? So we have to be kind of always thinking about this at the back of our mind, that somehow or the other, we are very, very fortunate that, in this day and age, sitting in the United States or wherever we are in this world, such has been the arrangement, right? Prabhupada made that arrangement for us. Wherever we are, this facility is provided to us. So we should not miss out on this opportunity. Brahman Brahmite Kono Bhagavan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasade Paya Bhakti Lata Peej. This time when Guru Maharaj gave us the initiation, this is how he started, right? After many, many lifetimes, when one becomes extremely fortunate, then by the mercy of Guru and Krishna, one attains, one receives the seed of bhakti, of devotion, right? So now that we have become so fortunate to have received this seed, we should make an effort to take care that the seed grows into a plant and into it blooms nicely into a full-fledged bhakti lata, basically, right? That we can relish. So by proper execution of the ways and means that have been provided to us by our sampradaya, we have to make that effort that we can stay Krishna conscious 24/7 while performing our prescribed duties, right? And if we kind of design our days in such a way, then it is definitely possible. So any questions or comment on this part, right? How we need to be engaged in our day-to-day activities, in our prescribed duties, while remaining Krishna conscious at the same time. Any questions about this particular aspect or comments?
Prabhu, you were talking about the seed, receiving the seed. What if we have neglected the seed? Can we revive the seed again, or how does that work?
Yes, Mataji, that's a good point, right? And our acharyas are also very intelligent, right? Whatever examples they give, there's a lot of thought that has gone behind it, right? So actually, I was recently reading an article wherein they have revived a seed that was fossilized for millions of years, right? Because seed is nothing but like a genetic code, right? And once you provide proper nourishment and a congenial environment, the seed can grow into a sapling really quickly, right? So to your point, if somehow it happens that we fail to nourish that seed, right, and it stays dormant for some time, Krishna promises that it won't deteriorate, right? In some, in the next life, Krishna will make an arrangement so that we again get an opportunity for us to kind of nourish that seed and kind of start from where it ended, right? So that stays with us, right? Just like a seed, although it could be dormant for a long, long time, but as soon as it gets a favorable environment, it grows into a plant again, right? But in my opinion, right, why would we should not really take that risk, right? Because although the seed stays dormant, but if we lose it for some reason or the other, or it could take us many, many lifetimes again to come back to that platform, right? So why do we want to do that? So for us, it is very, very important that we should stay conscious of the fact Bahunam Janmanam Ante, Jnanavan Mam Prapadyante, Vasudeva Sarvamiti Sa Mahatma Sudurlabha, Krishna says. Bahunam Janmanam Ante, Jnanavan Mam Prapadyate, right? So after many, many lifetimes, the intelligent, Jnanavan means the one who is in knowledge, right? After many, many lifetimes, he surrenders unto me, right? So it takes many, many lifetimes for one to receive this Bhakti Lata Bij. And therefore, we should always keep this in our mind that somehow or the other we have now become fortunate enough to receive this seed. We should be very careful with it. I hope I answered your question, Mataji.
Yes, Prabhu, thanks.
Anyone else would like to add to this or have any other comments or questions about this part? Okay. So we will move on. So we work not with our body actually, but with our mind and intelligence. So if the intelligence and the mind are always engaged in the thought of the Supreme Lord, then naturally the senses are also engaged in his service, right? So it is important for us to engage our intelligence and mind, and the senses will automatically follow. Superficially, at least, the activities of the senses remain the same, but the consciousness is changed, right? So the point that I made, that nothing really changes, but the consciousness is what changes, right? So the Bhagavad Gita teaches one how to absorb the mind and intelligence in the thought of the Lord. Such absorption will enable one to transfer himself to the kingdom of the Lord. If the mind is engaged in Krishna's service, then the senses are automatically engaged in his service. This is the art, and this is also the secret of Bhagavad Gita, total absorption in the thought of Shri Krishna. Right? So that is the key here. We have to engage our mind into Krishna consciousness, right? And that's how the process has been designed. And therefore, Prabhupada, in the paragraphs above, he's stressing upon scriptures. He's mentioning how Vedavyas, he wrote the entire body of this Vedic literature, right? There's this huge body of Vedic literature. Because books and literature, they directly engage with our mind and intelligence, right? Although the eyes are reading that, but our mind and intelligence directly engage with it. And the same goes for chanting and hearing, right? When we hear, although ears are kind of receiving the sound vibration, but the sound vibrations are appreciated by the mind, and then they go from the intelligence to our consciousness, right? So we have to kind of engage our mind into it. And once we engage our mind into Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada is saying that the senses will automatically follow without any effort. We will automatically be doing things that are Krishna consciousness by very nature. The modern man has struggled very hard to reach the moon, but he has not tried very hard to elevate himself spiritually. If one has 50 years of life ahead of him, he should engage that brief time in cultivating this practice of remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This practice is the devotional process. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Padasevanam Archanam Vandanam Dasyam Sakhyam Atma Nivedanam. This is from Srimad Bhagavatam 7.5.23. So Prabhupada is making again a very, very important point here, right? The modern man, we are struggling so hard. Things like reaching the moon. I mean, if you think about it, there's no practical utility of reaching the moon, really, right? And that's why we see, even in the US, right, there was a time when the US government spent a lot of money on the moon mission, but gradually we see that all of that money kind of, because people understood, right, what is the point? Okay, we reached the moon, but at that time the Cold War was going on, and the whole point of it was to prove supremacy over Russia. That was the whole point, really. Outside of that, it hardly achieved anything, right? So more than 50 years have passed, and now China is trying to do the same thing, right? They are trying to reach the moon because they want to prove that they are now the new superpower. So it's a lot of things that are done by the modern man are driven by this attitude of proving one supremacy over the other, right? Because the entire reason for us to be in this material world is to prove that we are the controllers, right? That is the whole reason, right? So a whole lot of resources and energy is simply spent to prove this one point that I am the controller, whether it is the nation, it is a society or an individual. Everyone to a certain extent, in fact, most of our efforts are towards that, right? Many people you would find, they have become billionaires, right? But they are still engaged in opening more and more startups, creating more and more newer companies, right? Because they do not want to lose their position and they want to be the richest person, right? Because it's not that by if they increase their wealth from 1 billion to 10 billion, it's not that suddenly they can have access to some material facility that $1 billion cannot provide them, right? A billion and a 10 billion is pretty much the same when it comes to one's ability to exploit material nature, right? There is nothing that $1 billion cannot buy that a $10 billion could buy for you. But what it means is you have more of a control as that dollar value increases, right? You can just control you can extend more of a control, right? So the whole point is about control, because the very reason for our existence in this material world is because we want to be the controllers, and that's why we are suffering in this material world, right? Mamevanshu jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana manasasthani indriyani prakriti sthani karshati, Krishna is saying. Although these living entities, they are my part and parcels, but they are struggling really, really hard in this material world. Krishna himself is saying this, right? And why are we struggling? We are struggling because we want to be the controllers. And the way Krishna has designed this world, it gives us the illusion that we are the controllers, but only to a certain point, right? We see there are so many rich people, right? They create billions of dollars of wealth, right? But eventually what happens? They die, right? Everyone has to die. There is no going away from this fact, right? But I'm not discouraging anyone from gaining material opulence, right? That's not the point. Material opulence, or if a person is poor, right, that has nothing to do with a person's ability to progress in Krishna consciousness. We have so many kings who were Krishna conscious, right? We have, even today, we have people who are very, very rich, right? We have the example of Amrish Prabhu, who has invested so much of his personal wealth into creating this beautiful temple in Mayapur Dham, right? So whether a person is rich or a poor has nothing to do of his ability or his inclination towards Krishna consciousness, right? And he should not be judged based on that criteria. But the point that I'm trying to make is, in general, you would find that people are struggling really, really hard to become the controllers, right? A lot of energy is being spent on that, but there is hardly any effort that is going on to elevate the society and individuals from a spiritual perspective. Even the education system that we have today hardly pays any attention to the spiritual upliftment, right? The questions, the very fundamental questions of life. Why does a person take birth, and why does a person need to die, and what happens to a person after he dies? These are like the very, very fundamental questions, and it's a huge surprise. This is really baffling. There is not enough thought, not enough thought, energy, and resources that is being spent to find answers to this question. And especially because there is such a huge body of knowledge that currently exists in the form of literature, Vedic literature, in religion, that tries to answer this question. Instead of that, people have tried to totally shun spiritual knowledge, just because some people are trying to exploit this knowledge for their own hidden interest, right? Their own agenda. But that happens with pretty much everything in this material world, right? You would find, if there is medical science, you will find quacks who are trying to cheat people through medical science, right? Even in the law, you would find lawyers, right, who have a cheating propensity, who are trying to cheat the people, right? But somehow or the other, and I think this is the effect of Kali Yuga, right? Nothing else but Kali Yuga, right? People in general are not inclined towards cultivating spiritual knowledge, and that is the big misfortune. But the one good thing that this Kali Yuga has is that simply by chanting the name of the Lord, one can elevate oneself to the highest platform, right? Although it has this fault that people are dull-minded and therefore they cannot appreciate the value of spiritual upliftment. But at the same time, some of us who are really, really fortunate, right? That we have some inclination towards spirituality, and questions like why do we take birth and why do we die kind of bother us. In fact, that was one of the things that really bothered me and that kind of pushed me towards spirituality, was this question that, no matter what I do, I have to die. So what's the point? That was a big thing. It kept me restless for a long time. And I found the answers in Bhagavad Gita, and that became a big push for me to adopt Krishna consciousness, right? So if we have become this fortunate by the mercy of Guru and Krishna and by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, that we have some inclination towards spirituality, being in this Kali Yuga, in this time and age, and we know the secret of sort of quickly elevating ourselves into spirituality, because that's the only good thing about this age, that simply by chanting the holy names of the Lord, we can transcend this material world and be transmitted to the transcendental realm, right? And be engaged in the lotus feet of Krishna, the service of the lotus feet of Krishna, right? In other ages, one has to go through the entire process. Eventually, everyone has to come to this platform of devotional service. There is no going away from that. Some people misunderstand that devotional service is only for the age of Kali Yuga, right? Chanting and dancing, kirtan and all of this is just for the age of Kali Yuga. It's not that. Chanting and dancing, engaging in the loving service of the Krishna is for every age, right? Krishna, in the verse that we just read before, Yogi Nam Api Sarvesham, he is not saying that that is a fact just in the age of Kali. He is saying, he's making a general statement, right? It is timeless. That by rendering loving devotional service unto the Lord is the highest form of yoga, whether it is Satyug, Kali Yug, Treta Yug, right? Or Dwapar Yug, it does not matter. But in the other ages, people have to go through the entire process, kindergarten, primary, high school, primary, senior, secondary, PhD, postdoc, right? They have to go through the entire process because they have a long life. The environment is such that they can do it. But in the age of Kali, because the time is so short, we have a short span of life. So Krishna, out of his extreme mercy, he came in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he sent Srila Prabhupada. He especially empowered him, right? And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came and gave us this process, and simply by performing this yagya of Krishna consciousness, of dancing and chanting, we can transcend this material boundary and be situated in the loving service of the Krishna. We can attain perfection, right? So now that we have become so fortunate, we are in this age of Kali Yuga, and we have spiritual inclination, and we are so fortunate to be a part of the family of Srila Prabhupada and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We should take this very, very seriously, right? Engage ourselves diligently into practicing Krishna consciousness. And because, all of us are very fortunate that, we have, a right kind of a balance between material opulence, spiritual understanding and everything, right? So we should utilize this opportunity to transcend this material life and be situated in the loving service of Sri Radha and Krishna. Okay, so I'll stop here because it's 7:54, and if anyone has any final questions or comments, please go ahead.
I was just going to make a comment. Chanting and dancing, I don't think it's just for Kali Yuga. Even in the spiritual world, I think
Exactly.
They would be doing chanting and dancing, let alone Kali Yuga.
Yep. So it's the means and the destination at the same time, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And feasting.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's not forget that, Jiva.
Corny Thai, they've given such a wonderful process, singing, dancing, and feasting.
I think Srila Prabhupada said in the Lila Amrita, he says, like, what does he say? Chanting, and kirtan and Krishna Katha, and feasting on prasadam. What more do we need?
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing, but that's what he says.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Mataji. And I mean, the best part is there is no loss, right? Once someone asked Srila Prabhupada, that Prabhupada, you always say that, if we follow this process, eventually, we will get to meet Krishna, right? And engage in his loving service. But what if after you die, you find out that there is no Krishna? What will happen then? Right? So Prabhupada says, well, it's not going to happen. I know that for a fact, but let's assume that that is the case, right? Even in that case, even right now, what are we doing, right? We are chanting, dancing, and eating nice feast, nice prasadam. We are nicely serving the deities. It's all, it's just so wonderfully done, right? It's just full of pleasure, whatever we are doing right now, right? So even in that situation, there is no loss, right? And then Prabhupada says, but what if he exists, right? If you do not follow this process, right? And there is actually a hell, there is actually a karmic reaction of our activities, and actually a person has to go through this process of life and death, right? So what if you find out in the next life, you actually become a hog? What would happen then? Because you ignore Krishna consciousness, right? The person was speechless. And that's such a valid point. Right, so there is actually no loss in this process. Even in this age, the way, I mean, Krishna conscious way of life, even if we forget everything else, right? Just if we focus on the present, even right now, when we are performing Krishna consciousness, it is 100% capable of giving us the highest form of pleasure, the highest form of bliss. If one is following Krishna consciousness nicely with a balanced lifestyle, right? Engaging in Krishna consciousness, one need not wait for the death to come and take us to Golok Vrindavan. In fact, that is not what devotees desire for. Once we follow the path of Krishna consciousness and engage in this activity very nicely, even in this body, we can experience that bliss. We do not have to wait for anything. It's just the transformation of consciousness which happens. So this is not about beyond death, right? Even in this life, this process works, and it has the potential, the capacity for us to experience that bliss. Any final comments or questions? Anyone?
Thank you for a wonderful class, Prabhu. You gave us a lot of thing to think about, and to contemplate.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you so much, all of you, for inspiring us and asking such nice questions and putting your thoughts together. I think this is very nice. We get to discuss this transcendental subject matter as part of the congregation, right, where we can exchange ideas and encourage each other in taking up to Krishna consciousness. So this is the beauty of Krishna consciousness, and we are all so very much grateful to Srila Prabhupada that he made this arrangement, right? This always makes me think of that. So thank you all so much.
And we definitely need the encouragement.
Absolutely, Mataji. Yes.
Every morning, I just don't want to get up. But then once I get up and do and listen to all the Bhagavad Gita, you feel completely enthused for the entire day,
Absolutely, Mataji. That's the food, right? That keeps us going.
Right.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for your nice class.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And congratulations again on your formal initiation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mataji. Please pray for us that we may sincerely follow the instructions of our Guru Maharaj and be engaged in devotional service.
We have already been doing it for a long time. This was just a...
Thank you. So we'll pay obeisances to the Vaishnavas. Vancha kalpatu patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo
Namo namaha.
Ananta Koti Vaishnavavrinda
Ki jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Ki jai. Abhiram Divya Das ki jai.
Ki jai.
Koti Vaishnava.
Congratulations, Prabhuji.